homeless girl accidentally came across a stray dog on the street, her subsequent actions made everyone cry. That winter was bitterly cold. Snow fell thickly and the wind howled through the dark alleyways like a mournful song stretching endlessly. The city was swallowed by the biting chill, the streets eerily empty, illuminated only by dim streetlights reflecting off the white snow. Amidst this frozen landscape, a small girl, no older than 8, huddled against a brick wall in a narrow alley. Her worn-out coat was far too thin to keep her warm, and her tiny hands, purple with cold, trembled uncontrollably. Her name was Emma, and she had no home. Once Emma had a family, a small apartment, a father who laughed often, and a mother who was gentle and kind. But that happiness was shattered one fateful afternoon when her father was taken away in an accident. A phone call, a stranger's voice announcing that he was gone forever. Her mother fell into despair, crushed beneath the weight of life. At first, she still tried to care for Emma, but with each passing day, she spoke less and less. The warmth in her eyes faded, and the home-cooked meals Emma once loved became fewer. Then one day, she simply left. No goodbye. Emma waited. She sat by the window for 3 days, watching the empty streets below, hoping her mother would return. But she never did. The apartment was soon taken away by the landlord. With no money, no one to protect her, Emma was thrown out onto the streets. From that moment on, she became nothing more than a silent shadow in the city, blending in with the homeless, surviving by scavenging food from trash bins and sleeping in abandoned train stations. But winter was merciless. Now she sat curled up in the alley, clutching a stale piece of bread. Her last meal. Every gust of wind felt like knives slicing through her skin, her chapped lips pressed against the dry crust, but she hesitated to eat. Tomorrow might be worse than today. A faint noise made Emma freeze. She held her breath, turning toward the darkness at the far end of the alley. A shape stirred under the dim streetlight. A dog. It lay curled up in the snow, its matted fur thin and dirty, its ribs showing through its frail body, its eyes dull with exhaustion, locked onto hers. It didn't move closer, it didn't bark, it simply watched her. Emma tightened her grip on the fabric of her ragged bag. She was starving. But something in the dog's eyes struck her. A painful familiarity, a reflection of herself in the glass windows of stores she could never enter. Lonely, exhausted, forgotten. She bit her lip, looking down at the piece of bread in her hand. She had learnt to be selfish in order to survive. People had turned their backs on her, no one had cared whether she lived or died. And yet... "Here," she whispered, breaking the bread in half and extending a piece toward the dog. The dog didn't snatch it away as she expected. It simply stared at her for a long moment, as if considering something, then cautiously approached. With careful movements, it took the bread from her fingers and backed away, chewing slowly. Emma watched it eat, feeling something unfamiliar stir inside her, a warmth that defied the cold. "Are you alone too?" she asked softly. The dog, of course, didn't answer. But after finishing the last bite, it didn't leave. Instead, it stepped closer and gently nuzzled her hand. Emma let out a weak smile. "I'll call you Rex." The dog didn't protest. It simply lay down beside her, as if deciding that from now on she would be its companion. Emma hesitated for a moment, then reached out and ran her fingers through its unkempt fur. Her hands were numb from the cold, but she couldn't help but wonder how long Rex had been wandering these streets. Just like her. 2 abandoned souls, forgotten by the world, now sitting together in the merciless winter. That night, for the first time in months, Emma didn't sleep alone. She curled up tightly, resting her head against Rex, feeling the faint warmth from his thin body. It wasn't much, but it was enough to ward off the worst of the cold. Rex shifted slightly, pressing closer, as if he too found comfort in her presence. Emma closed her eyes. She was still hungry, still cold, but for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel entirely alone. By morning, the nightmare began. Emma was jolted awake by the sound of hurried footsteps. Her eyes fluttered open to find the sky a dull grey, sunlight weakly filtering through the snow-laden air. Rex beside her lifted his head, ears perked, his body tense. Two men stood at the mouth of the alley. One wore a thick coat, his face rough and unshaven, a cigarette dangling from his lips as he scanned her with sharp eyes. The other was taller, wearing black gloves, and carried an expression that sent a shiver down her spine. "What do you think?" the shorter man muttered. The taller one smirked. "Skinny, but still worth something." Emma's blood turned to ice. She didn't need to ask to know what they wanted. She had heard the horror stories from other homeless kids, children who disappeared, children who were never seen again. Rex let out a deep growl, his fur bristling. The shorter man scoffed. "That dog looks mean." "But it's just a starving mutt." He took a step forward. Emma instinctively backed away, but before she could run, the man lunged, grabbing her wrist. Rex snarled. In a flash, the dog leapt, sinking its teeth into the man's arm. He let out a furious yell, stumbling backward. "Damn it! Get this thing off me!" Emma didn't hesitate. She ran. "Catch her!" the taller man shouted. She bolted out of the alley, her small feet slipping against the icy ground. Rex was right beside her, panting heavily. But the footsteps behind them didn't stop. Her heart pounded in terror. She had to keep running, faster, because this time, if they caught her, she would never escape again. Emma's breath came in ragged gasps as she sprinted through the icy streets, her small feet slipping on the frozen pavement. Behind her, the men's heavy footsteps echoed in the alley, their angry shouts cutting through the cold morning air. "Come back here, you little—" She didn't stop. She couldn't. Rex ran beside her, his legs strong despite his thin, malnourished frame. His breath was visible in the freezing air, but he never faltered, never slowed. They turned a corner sharply, nearly colliding with a pile of old crates. Emma's legs burned, but she pushed forward, forcing herself to keep going. If she stopped, she knew what would happen. Another alley, another turn, then a dead end. Emma skidded to a stop, her chest heaving. A brick wall loomed ahead, tall and impossible to climb. Panic surged through her. Behind her, the men's footsteps grew louder. "Nowhere to run now, kid." Emma turned, pressing her back against the cold brick. Her fingers clenched into fists, though she knew she was too weak to fight. Rex stood in front of her, his body tense, his ears flat against his head. A deep guttural growl rumbled in his throat as he bared his teeth. He would fight. He would protect her. The shorter man sneered, rubbing his injured arm. "Damn mutt, I should put you down right now." He took a step forward. Rex snarled louder. The taller man sighed, pulling something from his coat. A knife. Emma's stomach dropped. No. Her body moved before she could think. She threw herself in front of Rex, arms outstretched. "Don't hurt him," she cried, her voice hoarse. The men hesitated, but only for a second. Then a loud shout cut through the alley. "Hey! What the hell's going on here?" Emma's head snapped toward the sound. At the alley's entrance stood a man, middle-aged, rugged-looking, dressed in a thick winter coat. His sharp eyes flickered between Emma, Rex, and the two men. His presence was commanding, solid. The two men stiffened. The one with the knife quickly tucked it away. "Nothing," the shorter man muttered. "Just a street rat and a dog." The stranger didn't move. His gaze hardened. "Leave." A tense pause, then, with a muttered curse, the men turned and stalked away. Emma's legs wobbled, and she nearly collapsed. The man stepped forward. His face wasn't exactly kind, but it wasn't cruel either. He looked tired. "You're all right, kid?" Emma swallowed hard. Her voice barely worked. She glanced at Rex, who was still growling softly, protective. She didn't trust strangers, but something told her that this man, whoever he was, might be different. Emma hesitated, her back still pressed against the cold brick wall. The man who had saved her stood at the alley's entrance, hands in his coat pockets, eyes unreadable. "I'm not going to hurt you, kid," he said, voice rough but not unkind. "But those guys will come back." He nodded toward the direction the men had disappeared. "And next time, I might not be here." Emma swallowed hard. She knew he was right. She had been running for so long, but there was nowhere left to go. The man exhaled. "You got somewhere to be?" Silence. He studied her for a moment, then sighed. "My place isn't far. Food, a couch, you can stay for a bit, leave if you want." Then, without waiting for an answer, he turned and walked away. Emma stood frozen, heart pounding. Stay in the alley and risk being found again? or take a chance? Rex nudged her hand, waiting for her decision. She took a deep breath and followed. The walk was quiet, the streets dusted with fresh snow. The man led them to a small, worn-down house at the city's edge. It wasn't much, but the porch light cast a faint glow, warm against the cold. He unlocked the door. "You coming?" Emma hesitated. Rex sniffed the air but didn't growl. That was enough. She stepped inside. The house was simple, cluttered, a little messy but lived in. The warmth hit her immediately, making her shiver. "Sit if you want," the man said, heading to the kitchen. "I'll get food." Emma hovered near the door, unsure. Rex stayed beside her, wary but no longer tense. A few minutes later, the man placed a plate of leftover stew on the counter, another bowl with scraps for Rex. "Eat." Emma hesitated, then hunger won. The first spoonful was so warm, so real, it almost brought tears to her eyes. The man leaned against the counter, watching her in silence before finally speaking. "Name's James. James Carter." Emma swallowed. She didn't trust easily, but something in his voice made her answer. "Emma." James nodded. He glanced at Rex. "What's his name?" "Rex." "Tough name for a tough dog." They ate in silence. The warmth of the food, the quiet hum of the house, it all felt surreal. After a while, James spoke again. "You got anywhere to go?" Emma tensed. She could lie, say someone was looking for her, but what was the point? She shook her head. James sighed. "Figures." A pause, then, still not looking at her, he said, "You can stay, for now?" Emma blinked. "No strings, just until we figure something out, but if you stay, there are rules." Emma stiffened. "First rule, eat. Second, sleep. Third, don't steal my stuff." Emma hesitated, then, slowly, she nodded. James exhaled. "All right, kid." And just like that, for the first time in months, Emma had a place to stay. Emma sat on the worn couch, fingers gripping the thin blanket James had tossed her. The warmth of the house still felt strange, almost unreal. For so long the cold had been her only companion, this sudden comfort made her uneasy. Across the room, James sat in an old armchair watching the fire. He didn't force conversation, didn't ask questions. He just let her be, as if knowing she needed time. Rex lay curled at her feet, his breathing slow and steady, but his ears twitched, always alert. Emma sighed, pressing her face into his fur. Maybe tonight she could try to believe she was safe. The smell of coffee and food woke her. Emma blinked, momentarily disoriented. The fire had died to embers, but the house was still warm. Beside her, Rex stretched lazily. In the kitchen, James stood by the counter pouring coffee. On the table, 2 plates, one with eggs and toast, the other with scraps for Rex. Emma hesitated. No one had made her breakfast in, she couldn't even remember. James glanced at her. "Might as well eat properly if you're staying." She moved cautiously, as if expecting the food to vanish, but once she started eating, she couldn't stop. James sipped his coffee, watching. "So," he finally said, "you planning to stay?" Emma tensed. Stay? In a real house? The idea was terrifying. James sighed. "Until you figure that out, you'll have to help out. I'm not running a free hotel." Emma frowned slightly. "You can start with dishes," he added. "If you're here longer than a few days, there'll be more." She blinked. He wasn't kicking her out. He was giving her something to do. For some reason, that settled something inside her. She nodded. James smirked slightly. "Good. Grab a dish towel." The first few days were strange. Emma wasn't used to routine, to warmth, to having food, to belonging somewhere. She still flinched at loud noises, still tensed whenever James walked past, expecting him to suddenly demand she leave, but he never did. James mostly kept to himself, fixing things around the house, muttering curses when something didn't work. He didn't ask about her past, didn't push her to talk, but he noticed things. He noticed how she ate too fast, afraid the food would disappear, how she curled up too small at night, making herself invisible. And when a car backfired outside one night and she woke up gasping, eyes wide with fear, he noticed that too. James didn't ask. He just tossed her a pillow. "Go back to sleep, kid." For the first time in a long time, she actually did. One evening, as Emma sat by the window watching the snow fall, James spoke. "You ever been to school?" She stiffened. James didn't push when she didn't answer. He just hummed. "Figured you might be behind. We'll work on that." Emma frowned. "Why?" James gave her a look. "Because you're not a stray." The words hit harder than she expected. For so long she had been nothing, a shadow, drifting, forgotten, but James said it like it was obvious, like he meant it. She swallowed hard. Then, slowly, she nodded. James smirked. "Good. Now quit staring at the snow like a lost puppy and help me fix this damn heater." Emma rolled her eyes. For the first time, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she was home. Days passed, then weeks. Emma still wasn't sure how long she would stay, but she was sure of one thing. This was the longest she had gone without sleeping in the cold. She was still cautious, still slept with one ear open, but it was getting easier. The house had its own kind of quiet, a peaceful kind, not the terrifying silence of alleyways where danger lurked in the shadows. James was a man of few words, but in his own way he made sure she was all right. He didn't ask questions about her past, didn't push her to talk, but he noticed things. He noticed when she shivered and threw an old hoodie her way. He noticed when she hesitated before eating, as if expecting it to be taken from her, and always made sure there was enough food. He didn't say much, but his actions spoke louder than words. Emma was beginning to understand that. One morning, Emma woke to the smell of coffee and something sizzling on the stove. She rubbed her eyes, still adjusting to the idea of waking up somewhere safe. Rex stretched beside her, yawning, before jumping off the couch and trotting toward the kitchen. James stood at the stove, flipping pancakes. The sight made Emma pause. "You cook?" she asked, surprised. James snorted. "Barely." He slid a pancake onto a plate and set it on the counter. "It's just food. Eat." Emma hesitated, then sat down. The pancakes weren't pretty, but they were warm and fluffy. She didn't remember the last time she had something so simple, yet comforting. She took a bite, savoring the taste. James sat across from her with his coffee. "So," he started, "you ever going to stop flinching every time I walk by?" Emma froze mid-bite. James raised an eyebrow, taking a sip from his mug. He wasn't angry, just observing. Emma lowered her fork. I don't mean to." James didn't push. He just nodded, as if that was enough of an answer for now. Emma exhaled softly and took another bite. As the days turned into weeks, a new kind of routine settled in. James didn't treat her like a child, but he also didn't let her get away with doing nothing. "You stay and you help," he had said one day. "That's the deal." So Emma found herself helping. She washed dishes, swept the floors, and even helped him fix the old heater, though she wasn't sure how much she actually contributed besides handing him tools. James grumbled about the mess she and Rex made, but he never actually kicked them out, and that, more than anything, made Emma start to believe she might really have a place here. One afternoon, James handed her an old book. "Figured you should start catching up on school stuff," he said. "Can't have you running around not knowing how to do basic math." Emma frowned but took the book. She had gone to school before her father died, before everything fell apart. But now, even looking at a page of simple equations felt foreign. Still, James had given it to her for a reason, so she tried. She spent hours curled up on the couch, reading through old textbooks, with Rex snoozing beside her. Occasionally, James would glance over and grunt in approval, as if teaching her without actually saying it. It was strange. No one had cared about her education before. No one had cared about her before. But James, he did. One night, as Emma was finishing a chapter in her book, she heard James muttering in the other room. She peeked around the corner and saw him standing in front of an old photo on the shelf. A picture of a woman and a little girl, their smiles frozen in time. Emma didn't ask. She had seen that photo before. She had noticed how James never talked about them. Some wounds weren't meant to be reopened, so she just walked back to the couch, curled up beside Rex, and pretended not to have seen anything. She understood what it was like to carry a past too painful to share. As winter stretched on, Emma realized something she hadn't dared to believe before. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living. She had food. a warm place to sleep, someone who noticed if she was hungry or cold. She had Rex, always at her side, his tail wagging whenever she entered a room. And she had James, gruff, sarcastic, sometimes cranky, but always there. For the first time in a long, long time, she wasn't alone. Maybe she really had found a home.